This is the ultimate seafood tom yum. This is probably one of the most beloved soups coming off Southeast Asia. Spicy, sour, savory, and full of umami. And we all love tom yum, right? And it's actually super easy to make a restaurant quality tom yum from scratch. So let's do this. First up, I'm going to make the Nam Prik Pao or Thai Roasted Chilli Paste from scratch. Rustic tom yum does not need this, but if you want a restaurant level, then yes, you need this. I always just buy Nam Prik Pao because it's cheap, consistently good, but let's be extra today and make it from scratch. I have some dried chilies here. I like to give it a rinse first. You should too because it's always kind of dusty and dirty straight out of the bag. And then I like to roughly pat them dry with a paper towel. No need to get them totally dry. Just like this is fine. And then we are snipping them to smaller pieces. I like to use a pair of scissors for this. If your chilies have the stalks attached, make sure to cut it off and discard, okay? And then snip the chilies to smaller pieces just like this. To a dry pan, no oil needed. Dry toast the dried chilies over medium heat. Continuously stir so you do not burn the dried chilies until you start to smell the dried chilies and it starts to get this kind of charry bits. It should also start to smell all smoky and toasty and it's gonna smell so good. And then remove this from the pan. Same pan, we are next adding in some onions or shallots chopped as well as garlic. Same thing here, we are also dry toasting the onions and garlic. You want to let this toast until you see some charring happening on the onions and garlic as well. Alternatively, you can also roast the dried chilies, onions and garlic in the oven or air fryer all at one go, but to me this is a lot easier and quicker and more consistent, so this is what I go for. Once you have some charry and smoky onions and garlic, remove that from the pan as well. Next, I have some dried shrimps here, soaked in hot water for 5 minutes or until it softens. We are blending this first. You can use a food processor or even better, a pestle and mortar, but the blending is easiest for me. We blend the shrimps first, otherwise if you blend the shrimps with everything else, it's just not going to blend properly and you still have kind of chunks of shrimps in your paste still. Anyway, remove your shrimps from the blender once they're all nice and powdery, just like this. Same blender, let's blend everything else. Let's add the toasted onions and garlic first. The dried chilies next. This is palm sugar, you can use brown sugar instead. This is tamarind paste for that sour. This is shrimp paste or belacan, option to toast this first. Some fish sauce. And finally some oil to help it blend smoother, and then let's blend this up. Let this blend until halfway through and you get a rough paste like this. Add back that powdered dried shrimps from earlier. I'm also adding a bit more oil for easier blending. You can also add the oil in as you're blending whenever your blender is stuck. And then continue to blend until you get a nice thick paste just like this. Next, in the same pan that we used to toast the dried chilies because efficiency, right? Add oil or whatever's left from blending the Nam Prik Pao. Once hot and over low to medium heat, add the Nam Prik Pao paste. We are cooking this down so that it is ready for use. Basically, you want to continuously stir until the Nam Prik Pao thickens even more. If you find that it needs more oil, then just add more oil. Nam Prik Pao is an oily paste, so it does benefit from having more oil added to it. It will also start to turn a darker, deeper color, and you should be able to see some oil start to float or surface above the chili paste. Once your paste is looking like this, you can see how it's turned all nice and dark and deep in color. Your Nam Prik Pao is all done. Nam Prik Pao may be optional for tom yum, but not this. Prawn stock. There are two components to good tom yum. The first component would be that base prawn stock. To make the prawn stock, I first add some oil to the pot, and once hot and over medium heat, add your prawn heads and shells. Stir fry the prawn heads and shells in the pot until all of the prawn heads and shells turn a nice bright orange. But it's still not done yet. You want to let all of the liquid get drawn out and fully evaporate. This is super important. This is how you get a non-fishy prawn stock. Once all of that happens, and you should be able to smell the prawns, it should actually start smelling like grilled prawns. So good. That's when we add the water. Stir through, and we are letting this stock come to a boil. Once it starts to bubble, lower the heat and allow this to simmer for just about 15 to 20 minutes or so. You don't need to simmer this for very long at all. Once you're happy with the stock, simply strain the stock to get rid of all of the heads and shells, or you can just use a slotted spoon just like me. I really don't mind prawn bits in my stock at all. And our prawn stock is done. Super easy. The second component to good tom yum would be the herbs and aromatics. You might recognize these ingredients from my tom kha gai recipe. It's pretty much the same set. First, we have our galangal or blue ginger. This is what it looks like. You want to slice it thinly like this and then keep this to one side. Next, the lemongrass. Remove the tough outer layer and bruise it with the back of the knife or pestle until you have something like this. Make sure the fibers are exposed. We will also need kaffir lime leaves. This is what it looks like. This smells so good. I'm adding some Thai bird's eye chilies as well. You can slice yours thinly if you like your tom yum a roll spicy, but I am just mashing it for a less intense heat. Simply flatten the chilies with the flat side of the knife just like this. Next, we'll be using coriander or cilantro here. If yours come with the roots just like this, do not throw away the root. We are going to be using this as well. Optional, but I do love the extra herby flavor the roots add to the tom yum. Plus, no wastage. Then chop the leaves up just like this and then keep this to one side. Let's now actually make that tom yum. To a pot, add the rich prawn stock. Then add the bruised lemongrass, the galangal or blue ginger. Tear in or bruise the kaffir lime leaves just like this. The optional coriander or cilantro root. And the smashed bird's eye chilies. Let the soup come up to a boil, and you want to let all of the herbs and aromatics infuse the stock for about 10 minutes or so. When you come back and your kitchen is going to start to smell so amazing, and once you're happy with the stock, remove all of the big chunks of the aromatics. And this is why I like to leave them in these big chunks, just so I can use a slotted spoon for it without having to strain it. I also like to leave a couple of the aromatics in the soup still, like the lemongrass and the chilies here. I mean, just for the aesthetics, okay? I think it looks good like this. Then stir in the Nam Prik Pao. I like to use a couple of tablespoons of it for this amount. Adjust according to your preference or spice tolerance, and then stir this in. Then add our seafood of choice. I'm adding prawns today. Maybe you want to carefully add it in. Oof. Is it really tom yum if there are no prawns? I also have some fish balls here. I like to use fish fillets too, but I find that it tends to disintegrate in the soup sometimes. And finally, I have some squid here. Seafood cooks really quickly, so I can just add them all at one go. Super easy. I'm also adding in some mushrooms here, just your favorite mushrooms. I'm using some shiitake today. If you want to use tomatoes, you can add that in at this stage as well. Season the tom yum with more fish sauce, palm sugar or regular sugar, all of this is to taste, and give all of that a stir. Once the seafood cooks through and the mushrooms soften, the tom yum is almost done. Turn off the heat. With the heat turned off, add lime juice. This adds that all-important sourness in tom yum. You want to make sure the heat is turned off since we don't want the lime juice to turn bitter in the heat. And plenty of fresh coriander or cilantro. Give that a final stir to combine. Give that a final taste test. Add more fish sauce, sugar or lime juice like me here, and when you're happy with the final flavor, tom yum is all done. Immediately serve the tom yum. You can serve it by itself as a soup, but I love it with some rice or even with some noodles dunked in. This is such a crowd favorite. I mean, everybody loves tom yum and it's so quick and easy to make, one that is restaurant level. Okay, maybe it'll take a little bit longer if you're making that Nam Prik Pao from scratch, but it'll be worth it, okay? So I hope you give this one a go, and bye! If you love this recipe, you will probably love these ones next.